All right. Good morning, everybody. Again, second time up here. So today I am going to be talking about, I'm going to be focusing on John 1. So if you guys want to follow along in the Bible, it might be useful. The verses will be up on the screen, but if you want to have it in front of you, then, please feel free to do that. Can I have my PowerPoints? Because I want everyone to see how pretty it is, because, it's nice, isn't it? Sorry, I've got issues. I need things to be very pretty and... Okay, let's, in all seriousness. So, we have been doing a series on who is Jesus, the story of Jesus, taking it back to basics almost. And this technically was supposed to be the first one, but Josh and I got confused and I missed it. So we're doing it now, but I want you guys to think about it as this is, the beginning of this. This is literally the beginning of the story of Jesus. We're going to be looking at the book of John, which is comes after Matthew, Mark, Luke, which Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and you think of the story of Jesus. The Gospels, they tell the story of Jesus. They start where he was born, and they tell the story up until he dies and then comes back and what he does. John is a little bit different. John tells the story in a different way. Now, I want you guys to think about how you would tell the story of somebody, okay? Where do you start? And I thought up a lovely little story. So the story's about Josh. Josh was born almost 29 years ago, and he grew up in Kent, then moved to London, and so on and so on and so forth. Start at the beginning. Or Josh loves history, and he's an archaeologist, and actually that came because he loves it when he was a child. There are different ways of telling a story, but John tells the story. He goes back to the very, very beginning. He goes back to the creation. He doesn't just start at the time of Jesus. He starts before that. He puts Jesus into context. He puts Jesus where, he shows the past, he shows the present. Okay, so let's have a look at what I'm talking about, because Pete's looking confused. So, let's look at, I'm going to read, and then afterwards we'll go through and look at them. Okay, so, you can follow along. This is not on the slide, this is just the reading. 748 in the Church Bible. John 1 to verse 1 to 18. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. Different John, mind you. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He only came as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testifies concerning him. He cries out, saying, This was he of whom I said, This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me. From the fullness of his grace we have all received one blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made him known. Okay. I don't know if, this is quite a popular verse, isn't it? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and was God. I remember learning it in Sunday school when I was a little kid, and you don't really get it when you're little sometimes. You're like, okay, the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and it's to, we're going to focus and extrapolate that. So this book was aimed at Jews. It was telling the story of Jesus and how to understand it based on the story of God. Okay, because the Jews already knew about this creation, they knew about the story of God, but they didn't necessarily believe that Jesus was the Messiah. So this was John's attempt to get them to understand based on what had already gone before. So let's look at the first verse, which is, can you see that? Yeah, just about. If you can't, then the verse is on the link. Verse is underneath the verse, where it is. So we're going to focus first on John 1:1-3, and we're going to compare. We're going to do a bit of comparison, I feel like I'm back at Bible school, going through and looking at things and analysing. But I think it is important to do that because you start to understand and you start to get an in-depth understanding of what it's saying. So, in John 1:1-3, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made." Not mad, sorry. That's my fault. And then we look at Genesis 1, verse 1. "In the beginning, God..." Pardon. Sorry, I accidentally deleted the E. "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." So we can look at the comparison between these two. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. There are a lot of parallels between this. This is a creation story being told again. But one commentator that I looked at, he was saying, actually, this is it's almost like an expansion of the creation story. It's a deeper and a further commentary on the creation. It's not just in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It was in the beginning was the Word. And the word, yeah, I know, comes from the Greek logos, okay, which literally translates as words, but also means, is similar to the Hebrew concept of wisdom, of reason, it was deeper than just word as we know it, which is, it's something that tells a story. It was about ultimate intelligence, ultimate reason, ultimate will that is God. And the ancient Greeks believed that logos was the divine being. That was the Word, was the divine being. So John is taking words that are around him and using them to explain Jesus, which again is something really interesting. Let me find where I am. So again, John in this section highlights the Trinity. He looks at the Word, Jesus, in relationship to God. And I found this really interesting little thing. And even though I've known it, it's really interesting seeing it like this. There's God, who created the world. And then there's the different parts, the three persons that make up God together, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I really like the last bit where it talks about the Father is God, the Son is God, the Spirit is God, but they're different and they're separate. And so we kind of start to get a bit of an expansion of who Jesus is, that he is part of God. He's not separate. The God who created the world is the same God who is Jesus, which is what John was trying to get people at this time to understand, that it wasn't a separate thing. It was God in a different representation. Okay, so then we move on to looking at more of this story. Through him, all things were made. Sorry, I can't keep turning around. I can't see it at the back either. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Sorry. Pardon me. So, Again, we've got another comparison. And I think this is really good, actually, because you can start to see how it links in. Everyone knows the story of creation. Everyone knows, how things were started and how things, but this is great that it's comparing and is so closely linked. So Genesis 1:3 says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Again, we can see parallels, we can see links between the story of creation and the story of Jesus at the beginning of John. Again, a bit of a deeper, a broader explanation of who Jesus is. So in Genesis, we learn that God is creator. This teaches us an important lesson about our relationship with God. In John, we learn about the identity of God. So we learn about that the Word, so Jesus, is our creator as well. So then it's not separate. Again, it's not a separate ideology. It's not, this is God, who has done all these things leading up to Jesus' birth, and this is Jesus separate. No, it's tying it together. It's showing the reality of that. This is the same thing. This is the same God, which I think is really important when we think about our faith. And, it's not a faith that's baseless. It's not a faith that is just based in one man. It's based in God, and it's full and it's complete, really. We look at the light. We look at light in John 1, verses 4, where Jesus has been described as light, but he's already been described as the Word. He's been described as the ultimate intelligence, the ultimate reason, and now where he's been described as light. And a really good one that I saw was light reveals and words describe. So the words tell you about him, and the word explains, but light reveals who God is. And verse 4 says that life was in Jesus, and Jesus' life was our light. Jesus is both the creator and the one who gives us life again. Jesus came to bring life by teaching about righteousness and to reveal the light of God's, and also the light of God, and then the life of God. That makes sense? Are you with me? Yeah? Okay, so then you look at verse 5 where it says, the light shines in the darkness. The darkness does not overcome it. So let's retract, we've had Jesus the Word, who is the creator. Then we've had Jesus, who is the light, who brings life. And then the light shines into the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. Now, there are many ways that you can look at darkness. Darkness could be us, our lives. Darkness could be hell and Satan, but the light of Jesus shines into the darkness. And it's like if you turn a light on in a dark room, the darkness doesn't stay, the darkness goes away. The light overcomes and shines. And someone suggests that Jesus' purpose was to eliminate the darkness in the humans by the light of him, by the light of his life. And I like that this is written in the present. It says the light shines in the darkness. It doesn't say the light shone, and it's continual. It's not finished. It's not over. It is a continuing, and it is moving forward. It's not shone and it's over, and the darkness has not overcome it. This is a continual, the light has been switched on, and it's not turned off. It's still shining. And then we have a little bit of a random jump. We're talking about, Jesus and the Word and creation and light, and then we jump. We jump to John the Baptist. I remember learning about John the Baptist as a kid, and John the Baptist is always this madman, wearing sheep's clothes and dreadlocks, and he's coming in and telling people about Jesus. And it's really weird, actually, when you read it the first time, because, you read it, but then you don't always read it. And I remember reading it and going, but why is this bit here? Why is it suddenly John the Baptist? After all this theological extrapolation and thinking about the link between Jesus and God at the beginning of creation, suddenly we've got John the Baptist. Now, let's just read it, because I think that will give us some clues. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. So after this section, after the bit that I read in to start us off, we have a whole bit about John the Baptist. It talks about what he did, how he proclaimed that Jesus was coming. But this is really important and really interesting that this comes right after that we have this whole explanation of who Jesus is. Because something that would have been familiar to the people at the time who were religious was understanding of who John the Baptist was. They understood that he was a prophet. And, at the time, he was heralded as one of the greatest humans that had ever lived alongside Moses. So John was using the people that were around and who had already told about who Jesus was to show and to highlight the reality of Jesus. The Jewish people would have been very used to having prophets, to having people who were coming and telling them about what was coming. And John was saying, look, here it is. Here is the person who has come and has told you. Now here is Jesus. Here is the person who has come after. Jesus was announced. Jesus was announced and the path was made before him. And John's saying, look, here it is. Can you see it? Can you see that this is Jesus? The person that you're saying is not real. The person you're saying is not really God. This is God. This is amazing. You need to see it. And I think that's really interesting, actually, looking at the story of John, because it just looks so out of place. It looks like it doesn't fit in. But actually, when you think about it that way, it does. John is got like a big arrow going, Jesus. He's pointing to him and saying, this is what the Bible has said. This is what has happened. This is who he is. And then we go on to the best bit, I think, which is I actually think it's a little bit sarky, and we'll see what I mean when we look at it. And it's just that little bit of, you guys just did not notice. And he says, he was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. That kind of feeling you get like where you're saying the obvious. I feel like John is like, I'm telling you the obvious. Jesus made the world, and you didn't notice him. But it's also like that kind of, irony of, I don't know how to describe it in a simpler way, but that kind of Jesus, who made the world, came and the world didn't really notice him or recognize him. It's like, what's wrong with you, He's like, come on, see the reality of this situation. See the reality of who Jesus is and what he has done and where he has come from, and that he is not without base. And he says, sorry, not he. So we also have, they didn't recognize him. But then it changes tack and it says, some believed, some recognized and received Jesus. Some understood who he was, and they saw that despite the things that were being said around him, and the reality of who Jesus was. And those people were called children of God. They were given the right to be children with God, which is, again, is such a big thing. We think of child of God, and we learn it when you're little, and you sing it, and you go, I'm a child of God. But actually, the reality is it's a really deep thing, because that means that we are equal. We're on the same footing. We are seen as equal heirs to God's kingdom. And that's amazing. That's not a weak thing. That's not a trite thing. That's not a thing that's, that is some serious, in-depth, reaching into the reality of who God is and why he created us and what he wants us to be. That it's not, we're not just here to exist and kind of plod through, that we're here to be God's word and to be God's life on earth, And that's so much bigger. That is so much more amazing when you think about it like that the gift that we have been given, if we understand and receive and recognize who Jesus is, that we can have part of that, which is immense, really. And, I think the thing that we can look at is there's some big points that we can take. God the Father is not separate. He is not, up in a place where we can't see him or we can't understand him. He is his own being, but Jesus is just as much God as God the Father that we see as being, this separate being that is away from us and doesn't understand us. It makes it much closer. It makes it much more personal because Jesus came and he was on the earth with us. And that's, something that you can hold on to when you feel like God is so distant. He's not distant. He became a human being just like us. And if you can get that, then I think then it's easy to start building on that relationship with Jesus and to go to build it up. One thing that I really like about John is that as a Christian who has been doing this Christian thing for so long, I grew up in church, I knew God from I was very little, I learned all the songs, I learned all the stories, I knew all the stuff. But actually, the thing about John that's really good is because I think in a way it speaks to people like us, or people who, like me, who know God and has known God for a while, and it goes, you need to focus on that basic point again, who Jesus really is. This is the lineage of Jesus. It's not Abraham to Jesus. It's God coming to earth. And it's really important. I think even if you're not someone who has grown up in church, I think there's something really important to this book and to the way this story is told in John, is that it's showing you quite simply the link between Jesus and God, which again adds that depth that you just can't, you can't miss out on. And I think, this is something that as we are exploring and looking at the story of Jesus, it is important to go back to this basis, to go back to the reality of who Jesus is, that he is not just a prophet, he is not just God, but separate. He is a part of God. He is one of the three persons of God. And I think actually it'd be really good to just take a moment and for us to ask God where we're lacking in this, where we're missing out bits of the story, where we're not as sure, or we need that kind of reassurance of who Jesus is and what the reality of him and what his message is. And whether that's you're a new Christian, you're an old Christian, you've been doing it from the day dot, or you were doing it from last week. It's understanding the reality and the depth of who Jesus is. So, let's take a moment. Let's just focus again on him. And if you want prayer, if you are in whatever situation, you want to have that depth of understanding, you want to spend more time getting to know and reaffirming what you already know, then, and you need God's help to do that because it can be tough, then let's ask for each other for prayer. So you can ask Sally, Linda, Rob, myself, or the person who's sitting next to you who you trust to pray with you and to just to give you that space, the time to, and the willingness to want to get to know Jesus more. Okay, so if we just take a moment. Lord, I just pray that we will, in every situation, know the depth and wonder of knowing you and what it means to become a child of God and what that means continually, that the light is always shining. Lord, I just pray that you will be with us and you will guide us as we rediscover and re-explore who you are. Lord, I pray that you show us and reveal new things, exciting things, things that we haven't even thought about. In your name, Lord God.